Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I'm Gam Wijetunge, Director of NHTSA's Office of EMS. We'll wait just a minute here as folks come into the room and then get started. We'll just give it one more minute for attendees to come into the room. All right, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the country, and thank you for joining us. My name is Gam Wijetunge. I'm Director of the Office of EMS at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. So I'll just be going over a few logistics before we hand things over to our speakers. First off, obviously, for those of you who are signed in today, obviously you're aware of our EMS Focus webinar series. But I just wanted to remind you that we produce one webinar each quarter to bring information about EMS system improvement from NHTSA and the Office of EMS, as well as from our federal partners on the Federal Interagency Committee on EMS, or FICOMS. We address a variety of topics and encourage you to register for upcoming webinar topics and sign up for those announcements via email at ems.gov. On our next slides, just a heads up, we do have some QR codes, so if you want to stand ready to capture those QR codes. So our upcoming webinars, our next two webinars will be later this year in March and June, and you can use the QR code on your screen to register, as well as watch recordings of our archived webinar installments. And I'll just pause a sec in case you want to capture that QR code. Next slide, please. So very quickly, before we dive into our grant funding topic today, I want to remind you about the focus on NHTSA's Office of EMS. The Office of EMS, which houses NHTSA's National 911 program, supports the improvement of patient care in the out-of-hospital setting on a national level. And we do so in three ways. One, we bring together available data and industry experts to identify the most critical issues facing the profession. Two, we tackle those issues through collaboration with partners, including other federal agencies and national EMS organizations. And three, we provide awareness and education about best practices and evidence-based guidelines and other resources. Next slide, please. So again, another QR code for you to capture. One of the ways we support our goals is through sharing and storing many resources to help EMS leaders and clinicians access the information that they need. EMS.gov's updated resources hub makes it easy to search for, browse, and download a wide variety of documents, reports, and guidelines created by NHTSA and our partners and stakeholders. From the EMS agenda for the future to clinical guidelines and reports, these resources help to advance the profession nationwide. You can access those resources on ems.gov or go using the QR code that is up on your screen. I'll pause for a second just so in case you want to capture that. Next slide, please. So a little housekeeping before we begin with the main content of our webinar. I'd like to just go over some of the Zoom functions. You can use the Q&A button in your operation panel to submit questions throughout the webinar, and we'll address those in the Q&A portion of the agenda in the last 15 minutes or so of the hour. Feel free to submit questions as they occur, and our facilitator will collate them at the end of our webinar, at the end of our speaker panel presentations. And you can use the Show Captions button to view closed captioning at any time. Next slide, please. So for today's webinar, we'll be highlighting how EMS agencies can use Department of Transportation grant funding opportunities to improve EMS system response to roadway crashes. We'll review the opportunities and requirements of the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program with Paul Teicher, a senior transportation policy analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Transportation. He'll share information and best practices to help EMS agencies apply for the SS4A, or Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. And then we'll hear directly from Fire Chief and grant recipient Bruce Evans about how his agency completed the process, secured a grant award, and how they'll be putting those funds to use. And after that, we'll have some time for some Q&A. Next slide. So let's go ahead and dive in. So according to data from the National EMS Information System, or NEMSIS, in 2022, 911 dispatched EMS clinicians to nearly 1.5 million crashes. We know that appropriately resourced and well-designed EMS, trauma, and 911 systems are essential to treating serious crash injuries and preventing them from becoming fatal. We also know that 911 telecommunicators and EMS clinicians are critical to successful crash response and providing the right care at the right time to enhance survivability. And that is why NHTSA has supported the development of robust EMS systems since the 1960s. Next slide. With a once-in-a-generation investment in infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Department of Transportation has the opportunity to turn the vision into a reality. And that vision is the National Roadway Safety Strategy, with an aim of eliminating roadway deaths and injuries in the United States. The 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law includes nearly $14 billion in new funding to be invested directly into improving roadway safety. Approximately $6 billion authorized for the brand new SS4A grant program, with $5 billion in advanced appropriations. The bipartisan infrastructure law also includes almost $4 billion for highway safety, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and almost $4 billion dedicated to improve data collection, vehicle safety, and truck safety. And today, we're talking about the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, which supports local initiatives through grants to prevent death and serious injury on our roadways. Next slide, please. So the National Roadway Safety Strategy, or NRSS, utilizes the safe system approach to guide its activities. And you'll notice that post-crash care is a key element of this approach. That includes safer people, safer roads, safer vehicles, safer speeds, and post-crash care. If you want to learn more about the National Roadway Safety Strategy and the Safe System approach, we've included a QR code up on the slide, and you can feel free to take a look at that. Next slide. So the DOT and NHTSA and all our agencies are data-driven, and we're focused on benchmarking and improving results. Throughout the course of the last 2 years, we've worked with highway safety and EMS experts using available data to help EMS better engage with highway safety officials in their state and local communities. to show how much of an impact pre-hospital care has in reducing the number of deaths and serious injuries from vehicle crashes. NHTSA has developed a graphic that demonstrates the national data that relates to how EMS and 911 can impact crash outcomes. And you can review it at the QR code up on the screen on ems.gov. And feel free to share this information with your local highway safety officials. Perhaps the most impactful statistic here is that of the nearly 43,000 people who died as a result of a crash, nearly 40% were still alive when responders arrived, but later died from their injuries. When we talk about accessing available grant funds, it's with the intention of helping EMS systems improve their ability to provide the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. And it's also important to note that increased support to 911 PSAPs can help improve training and support the replacement of outdated technologies to improve the location accuracy of crash victims. With the support of the highway safety community, EMS and 911 systems can make improvements so that those 40% of crash victims ultimately do not become fatalities. And we'll do this all by working together and collaborating. Next slide, please. So now I'll hand it all over to Paul Teicher, a Senior Transportation Policy Analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Transportation. Paul.
Great. Thank you, Gam, and thank you all for taking some time today to learn about the Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary grant program. I'm going to go ahead and steal the screen, so give me 1 second while I get that set up. All right, so I am the program manager for the Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary grant program. And I'm here today to give an overview of what the funding program is, some opportunities for you to get involved and potentially get access to some of that federal funding, and then some of the lessons learned from previous application cycles so that you all have a little bit of a head start in thinking about how you fit in and what you can do and how to be successful. I am not going to be able to give within the time allotted the full rundown, but you'll have a good sense of like where you fit, hopefully, and we'll have more webinars and other things coming once the next round of funding is announced. And so this is like a good teaser to figure out where you fit, and then we'll have lots of resources and other materials for those who want to follow up. Gam already gave a little bit of the US DOT context, so I'll breeze through a little of these pretty fast. But just to set the stage, and you mentioned, we've had a pretty significant increase in roadway fatalities in 2020 and 2021, which were similar to a lot of other types of early deaths, like gun violence, as well as overdoses and other things. And so the traffic fatalities were kind of followed somewhat of a similar trend. And we're just starting to edge down a little bit, but it's still a significant problem, one that the secretary, and I'm in the office of the secretary has taken a keen interest in making sure we address. He's called it a crisis. Secretary Pete Buttigieg has called it a crisis, one that's preventable. And that's part of the reason why we're here, to reach out to folks like you all who can help influence and improve roadway safety. I think one context that is important is that we are particularly mindful of the disproportionate impacts that happen to certain types of people who use the roads, specifically those who are outside of a vehicle. So while the number of fatalities kind of crept up from 2010, when you're looking at the bigger picture, when you're looking at people who are walking and biking, their proportion and their numbers have gone up pretty dramatically. And it's something that is worrying to us. And one of the solutions and one of the areas to help address that is the Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary grant program. Gam touched on a few of these, so maybe I'll be quick. But part of what we did with this National Roadway Safety Strategy is we committed to 0 deaths on our roads. We adopted this safe system approach, and I'm just going to underscore it. post-crash care, and that first response is a part of that and is a really essential piece. One of the interesting things about a safe system approach is that we're not trying to prevent all crashes. We're just trying to prevent serious injuries and fatalities on our roadways. And really, the EMS and the first responder community can take what could have been a fatality and someone dying on a road, a life lost, to a serious injury, and from a serious injury just to maybe a minor injury. And so we recognize your role and be able to meet some of our goals, and we want you to get involved. Kind of in order to, in addition to the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding, a lot of other actions the department is taking. I won't go into detail. There's a lot of information on our website, and we also engage our stakeholders, knowing that USDOT is not the only one who can play a role, and that there are others, and there are over 100 now that are across the nation that have committed to specific tangible actions that they're doing in support of the National Roadway Safety Strategy and improving their communities and roadway safety. All right, now with the bigger picture, let's talk about one of the kind of what folks have described as one of the main programs, the National Roadway Safety Strategy, because of both the amount of money as well as to the focus. So Gail mentioned there was up to $6 billion available, $5 billion in advance appropriations. So we have about $1 billion every single year. We just finished round 2 funding, and we're on to round 3. So we have over $3 billion left. The main purpose of the program is to prevent deaths and serious injuries on our roadways. And there's really 2 parts to it. You develop this comprehensive safety plan of identifying your biggest safety risks, engaging your community and other things, identifying what your problems are, figuring out what solutions you want to do, and then implementing those. And so Safe Streets and Roads for All really implements, provides funding for both for the planning part and for the implementation. I will also say that one thing that's unique to this program is that it cuts across all different types of interventions across that safe system approach. So it could be infrastructure, it could be behavioral, it could be operational. And that's why we're here today, because this is a funding source that has a lot of, that has a Venn diagram and an access to post-crash care and some of the work you all are doing. Those who are eligible is basically the sub-state level. So political subdivision of a state, and that is city, county, town, borough, and those type of things, special districts, metropolitan planning organizations, those big regional ones, as well as fairly recognized tribal governments. And the activities that I mentioned before, maybe in a little bit more detail, I'm going to break them down, are developing that comprehensive safety action plan. So the piece that your colleague is going to talk to you all about after my presentation is done is developing an action plan. You can also carry out supplemental planning and demonstration activities. I'll describe those in a second. Once you get that good plan in place, you can also do the type of design and development work in order to execute a project and strategy, and then implement those. That middle one might not be as useful for you all. It's usually most like construction design, but not exclusively for like a building or changing a new roadway geometry or adding new safety features. So let me talk a little bit about the planning and demonstration grants. There are 2 different types. I mentioned there's a planning side and a implementation piece. I'll start with the planning and demonstration grants, which are really that falls in that planning bucket. And you can develop a comprehensive safety action plan, and that includes 8 components. We actually have like a whole song and dance related to those. And I won't go into too much other than really it's you do some data analysis, you engage your community, you create a task force, you have intergovernmental and other organizations as part of your task force to identify what your biggest safety problems are, figure out based on those problems what solutions you want to do, what projects and strategies. And then you can also take a look at your processes, think about equity, maybe vulnerable populations like people who are older or children or certain demographic groups. And then create a plan with that list of projects and strategies, and then have that as the basis. And really it's grounded in what a lot of cities call Vision Zero type plans, but there are a lot of different names, and I think there are many different stripes of planning that encompass portions of this, and this Safe Streets for All has a really good grounding with those, plus a few other bells and whistles. Supplemental planning is adding some additional layers, additional things to an existing plan that's already going. So topical safety plans, for example, could be creating an EMS subplan within your comprehensive safety action plan. Maybe it's looking at safety analysis and data collection. Maybe you're linking hospital records and crash information for more granular, more specific trauma information to help inform what kind of interventions you're going to do. Those are two that come to mind for this community, but they can also do target equity assessments. Maybe there's certain neighborhoods that you want to focus on, maybe particularly dangerous corridors. You want to do a road safety audit and see what's going on. And then maybe you want to engage your community. So that's kind of the second part within a plan and demonstration grant bucket. And then the third part, this one's a little bit difficult to wrap your head around, so I'll give a few examples. These are called demonstration activities. And so this is a practical way to test out your action plan. So you develop a nice plan, or you're developing a nice plan, and you want to be able to try things out before deciding what projects and strategies you spend millions of dollars on, you really invest in. That is something that you can do through a demonstration activity. So feasibility studies using quick build strategies, and one of those, it's usually infrastructure, and that could be paint and plastic bollards. And I'll just go back to my previous slide. If you look on the bottom left-hand corner, that Solomon Foundation picture, you'll see they've reallocated the road space to make a separated bike lane, kind of change some of the geometry of that intersection. That's an example of a feasibility study using a quick build. You can also pilot program for behavioral operational activities. Say you want to test out an EMS preemption or prioritization signal technology or activity. That's something you could do potentially through these demonstration grants. You can also do pilot programs for new type of technology. So say you are interested in upgrading to help with the best and latest EMS type practices. You can there's a certain technology you're interested in trying out in your community. That's something that could also fit within a demonstration grant. Those are things that are usually kind of smaller in scale. They're temporary. You assess what works, and then you decide whether you want to include those into your overall action plan and your projects and your strategies. Implementation grants, and these really are principally fund those things and those safety actions in your plan, those projects and strategies that you've identified through that comprehensive safety action planning process. And these, again, could be infrastructure, behavioral, operational. It all ties back to what's in the action plan. And I will underscore that during the planning process, what comes up as your biggest safety problems, and your solutions end up being what we fund through that implementation grant. So if post-crash care, EMS, and first responders are not at the table bringing good ideas and effective interventions into that plan, then it's kind of hard to apply for these implementation grants. And I'll get to a way to do that and later in the presentation. Generally, this is a kind of a general requirement is you have to have a plan in place in order to apply for implementation grants. You create that high quality plan, or you have one in place already, and then you apply. And I will note that you can also have some additional planning. So that supplemental planning and demonstration activities I mentioned before, that's something that you can also be kind of bundled together with an implementation grant. So maybe they're redoing a road, but they also want to try out signal prioritization and preemption, and maybe I can do like an EMS action, sub-action plan to spruce up their plan. All that could be bundled within a implementation grant, as long as that project and strategy is the main core. All right. Just to give you a sense on who's been applying and kind of what's been out there. I mentioned there's been 2 rounds done to date. This past round, this is the fiscal year 2023, FY23. We awarded almost $900 million for funding to 620 regional, local, and tribal communities. You can see in the map, we have kind of the locations, and that's just for FY23. Over calendar year 2023, we actually, since it was a new program, we actually had 2 awards, one in February well, three, one in February, one in October, and then one in December. And to date, we've given out over $1.7 billion in awards to over 1,000 communities, and about 70% of the nation's population is currently covered by one of our planning type activities. And so the likelihood is that a lot of you are already in places that are doing Safe Streets and Roads for All grant awards, or have some sort of activity that is analogous to it. And I think that's a good thing to underscore, where for many of you, you might not need to be the one who starts from scratch. You can join what's an existing effort. And we have a good map and list of awardees on our website. That's a good way to see if your community, whether that's at the city or county or regional level. Sometimes it might be a little bit different, but that doesn't mean you can't get involved. And I'll tell you a little bit more how to do that in just a second. I'll drop a few names of those who are have been doing EMS type activities. One of whom you will hear from in just a few minutes. That's the Upper Pine River Fire Protection District. I won't steal any thunder. The city of Richardson is developing an action plan, and they also included a demonstration activity for a GPS-based preemption system to reduce response times for EMS. Great example of a demonstration activity. City of Burlington is also did a planning and demonstration grant award, and they're doing a number of different things. But they're also establishing a framework for future deployment of how they're going to do their signal priority and signal preemption. And so I think that's a nice, great bundling of different types of activities that cut across multiple different sectors and types of interventions. And that's another demonstration activity and kind of a planning piece too. The town of Colony EMS, and they banded together kind of for a more regional effort. They received over $2 million to try out an emergency transponder system, as well as a platform to better interface with specialty care registries, so they can give timely information for incoming patients into their trauma centers. Last but not least, Nashville, Davidson County received an implementation grant. They were doing it's a corridor redesign, and they are also doing some work in order to advance EMS. I clicked too fast. All right, they're seeing what they can do along the key emergency response route. So these are some examples that we have a number of them that have been awarded from the EMS community. So you will not be the first one, and we're hoping to see more with similar types of activities in this coming funding round. I think I'll drive it home. These comprehensive safety action plans should be encompassing operational and post-crash care activities, and so having these task force and thinking about it, having you all at those tables will be really instrumental so that you all get included. I think there's a natural tendency to have the infrastructure people lead, and then maybe they'll get the law enforcement or behavioral folks involved. And I don't want you to get missed in a lot of those planning. So there's 70% of the nation's population doing planning already. You should get involved if you've not been already. You can demonstration activities are a great way to try things out and to do some pieces that you might not have been able to get funding for in the past, help improve your service, your support, and how you do business. And some just good examples. I gave the specifics, but I'll just drive it home again. Projects that reduce or demonstration activities that attempt to figure out how to reduce response times, emergency dispatch improvements, traffic signal preemption, other improvements to the on-scene EMS care, and then other EMS evidence-based countermeasures. All those could fit within a potential both a planning and demonstration grant from the demonstration activity side, or an implementation grant of a funding a project. All right, I'm going to have 3 different buckets to walk through, and kind of 3 different scenarios of what to think about. And kind of the basic one, and I've already mentioned a few times, it's worth bearing a quick repetition. Is there already a plan going on in your community? If yes, you should get involved in that planning process, and our folks can be more than happy to help support. identifying who those are and working with our agency partners. If no, maybe you're the ones that have the potential, have the capacity and the means and the interest to be able to start. And that action plan grant, that action plan through a plan and demonstration grant, it's a great way to start getting involved in the process. So say the answer was yes, maybe your region is doing an action plan. You can do demonstration activities and supplemental planning. If there's one that's currently underway or completed, you don't necessarily have to be the jurisdiction with the plan. You can use that plan in order to be able to apply for demonstration activities and supplemental planning in coordination with the person with the grant. That's key. We expect a lot of these to be multi-jurisdictional in nature, and working with your partners at the either city, county, regional, whatever level ends up being, is a great way to get access to some of the funding and get involved. And then maybe you have a plan in place. You can apply for implementation as long as the that project and strategy is in that qualifying action plan. So let me walk through a few of these. So developing an action plan. I mean, I think this is my why I think it's a good idea slide, just to answer some of the common questions we've received. So will safe streets meet the needs of my community? We have that core bedrock of the 8 components that need to be done, but there's a lot of flexibility. I mean, we've tailored this for different geographies, different roadway safety needs, different types of approaches, and so there's a lot of flexibility to meet the needs of your community in order to address and the biggest roadway safety problems within that you all are facing. What does the application look like? Is it burdensome? Action plan is actually pretty easy. I'll tell you what it is in a second, but the level of effort compared to your average discretionary grant is relatively low. And we've purposely done that, knowing that some of our folks who are applying have lower capacity. They don't have dozens of grant writers and administrators, and they bootstraps type folks who want to make a difference. We've made the entry for the application process as accessible as possible for those folks. So for an action plan, you apply. What's your likelihood of getting funded? We fund most of our action plan grants. So, and a lot of the plan and demonstration grants, I think last time around was maybe over 90%. So if you're going to spend a few hours, put in an application, the likelihood is, as long as you read the application and follow, it's pretty likely you'll get funded. There is one thing that is also a common question is, what about non-federal match? Like, how much funds do I have to put in? There is an 80-20 match. So at least 20% of the funds for a total project has to be from a non-federal source. That doesn't necessarily need to be from your local coffers. It could be from philanthropy. It could be maybe through a different type of entity. Maybe it's a state DOT. That happened a lot for planning in like Iowa and Kansas, Massachusetts. And so you can also in-kind contributions, and that's basically counting the time spent in order to do certain activities to be able to include towards that match. So there's different ways to do it. We have some resources on our website, so you can think through how to do that. So yes, there's a match. There's no waivers for it, but there are different ways to be able to access these funds, and I would hopefully that's not a major barrier. So I mentioned the plan and demonstration grant. I'm not going to walk through all this. I mean, I think the big takeaway is we need 3 data points and then 2 pages of application narrative, plus those like general forms, that standard forms that you have to apply for all federal grants. But really, it's 2 pages and 3 data points from federally available data sources. Again, narrative is only 2 pages, and then I think the thing is, you want, as these narratives, they're pretty basic, and really the goal is, we know that there might be people from different information, they don't know exactly what they're doing for some of the pieces, but they know what some things that are on their mind, and so they can talk a little bit about the scope of work to be performed, what the roadway safety issues that necessitate that planning, and then how your fund activities will inform an action plan. So I think just got to be really clear, like we're really concerned about roadway safety because of X, Y, and Z. we're proposing to do this, develop a comprehensive safety action plan. We also plan on doing supplemental planning for ABC, and all that funding will develop the core components of a comprehensive safety plan and that supplemental plan. And that's really it in the 2 pages. If you're applying for demonstration activities, we do ask that so they're supposed to be temporary, short-term. You're just trying to decide whether it works for your community or not. You have to figure out, you have to describe how you're going to measure whether it works or not and what the benefit is. Maybe it's reduced response time, or measuring how certain communications work, or whether the signal prioritization works for being able to get from point A to point B within a target goal. I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, and we have a lot of flexibility. You also need to kind of provide a brief schedule to show, what you plan on doing and when that's going to be done. All right. So for those who are interested in supplemental planning and demonstration, say there's a plan going on, you want to do some EMS type activity, try out a technology through a demonstration activity. Again, you don't have to be the one with the action plan. So say the regional MPO is developing an action plan, you can go to them, but hey, we want to do a demonstration activity focused on signal prioritization. We want that to inform our action plan for the regional effort. You talk to them and say, yep, that's a good idea. You can apply separately, noting that this regional plan is in effect. That's one good way. If there's already a plan completed, that's easy. If you're doing a plan, you can apply over multiple years. So maybe you developed in the first year you applied for developing the action plan. Second year you're going for demonstration activities, also eligible, and we allow that. Also I mentioned, if you're within the jurisdiction or you have that nexus to another entity that's working on an action plan, that's great. Again, if you're going to use someone else's plan to do an activity, make sure you coordinate with them. All these are supposed to and intended to inform what the projects and strategies are within a given action plan. And if you're not coordinating with them, how do they know whether it works or not, and whether they should incorporate it into their plan? I think there was one thing that was a little bit difficult and is a little bit hard, is like, what is the difference between implementing a project and a demonstration activity? So again, a lot of these demonstration activities, you're trying out smaller scale testing, pilot, finite period. It's supposed to inform the series of projects and strategies. And you're supposed to look at it, you're supposed to measure how it's working, and then assess whether the benefits make sense and whether it works for your community. On the flip side, usually the projects and strategies, those are like major construction, it's system wide, you already know it works, you've already piloted it, you just want to do it, it's permanent, it's there. The demonstration activities, you don't have to necessarily like take it down and stop it after you're done with it, but you have to assess whether it works or not. If it's not working, you should stop it. Implementation, you already know it works for you, it's effective strategy that fits well within your plan, you're applying to do it and you're just rolling it out. I think we had a few folks who applied for demonstration activities that said, we have done a pilot and now we would like to implement the pilot, which is a project and strategy, not necessarily a demonstration activity. You're testing something, you're trying out something new. You're not implementing it across a wide space. So there's a little bit of nuance. It's kind of like applied planning, but it's not quite implementation. All right. Again, the final deliverables, you have to connect back to the action plan, see whether it works, and then updating your projects and strategies. And then for implementation of projects and strategies, if you're at the stage, you kind of already know. I'll give you a sense of what the level of effort is. It's more intensive than the plan and demonstration grant. It's about 10 pages of narrative. There's more selection criteria. It's more competitive. I think about 20% of those who applied received an implementation grant award last time around. So it's not a 1 in a million winning the lottery, but also it's competitive, and we have a lot of good high quality projects that we expect in the future. This is something that you can look towards, and then when you're thinking about developing a plan, how it all informs how you build that level of evidence. Here's kind of what it looks like. I would say if you are familiar with like RAISE or infra or those type of programs. Those have like a benefit cost analysis, some other components that we don't require here. Just recognizing the scope, it's limited to roadway safety, and the capacity of those who are applying. All right. So hopefully that gave you a sense of where you're at, whether you want to start a new plan, whether you want to hop onto an existing plan, either to get involved in the task force or to apply for that supplemental plan or demonstration, or maybe you're ready to implement and you have these really great strategies and you're ready to apply for that implementation grant. Those are the kind of the three options I talked through. Now the question is, when will that be? So the next notice of funding opportunity is coming in a few weeks. We expect in February. We're gonna have over 1.2 billion made available. Over half of that is going to be dedicated for planning and demonstration activities. So and that is partially why we want to encourage everyone, including the folks who are on this webinar, to think about that, because we have a lot of available funding, and we want to make sure it goes to the right places, including those post-crash care activities will reduce harm and save lives. We'll have some more webinars, and we have a lot of resources on our website that are going to be expected in February. So, if maybe you couldn't quite wrap your head around everything I just mentioned, we'll have a lot more information. So that is the overview. I'm going to save the questions till later, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and pass it on over so you can hear the real life example from one of our award recipients.
So much, Paul. And with that, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Bruce Evans, the fire chief at the Upper Pine River Fire Protection District in Colorado. Bruce is one of the first EMS agencies to successfully secure funding through SS4A. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Bruce. Chief Evans.
All right. Thanks, Cam. Can everybody hear? Sounds good?
You're loud and clear.
All right, great. So again, I was asked to speak, and again, thanks for everybody for taking some interest in this and making our roads a little bit safer. So the Safe Streets Grant, you have to ask yourself why fire and EMS should be involved with this. And just give you a little bit of demographics about our fire district here. So we're about 282 square miles in southwest Colorado, La Plata and Archuleta County. Down the Four Corners area, about 12,000 people in those 282 square miles. We have about 30 miles of US 160, which is a pretty dangerous stretch of road. It's got long sweeping curves, 2 lanes. It's subject to weather. It's got a couple mountain passes on it. And it usually varies between in the top 3 in Colorado for animal strikes. But there's a lot of just really horrendous crashes that are on this road. We staff with about 8 people a day. That's our minimum staffing. And then there's about 5 admin people here. So we're essentially a super rural fire and EMS agency. Next slide, please. So the reason we went after this grant is we wanted to control the narrative. So kind of looking at the NOFO on the grant, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and having a presentation from GAM when we were in DC with the NAMT board of directors. This looked like it had the opportunity to fund a lot of post-crash care activities, which definitely revolve around EMS. So like I said, we wanted to control the narrative. Obviously, writing the safety plan opens up to the implementation grant, as we heard from the previous speaker. And if you're going to have the implementation grant, then you have to kind of follow a template and follow a safety plan. And if you're not the one writing it and put EMS into it, I think we've all kind of been around the block where a law enforcement grant or a highway traffic safety grant winds up kind of excluding EMS because, frankly, a lot of times local government, state government, county governments don't really know what EMS does. So again, if we're going to be in the game, we got to show up. And again, this was a way for us to control the narrative and open things up in post-crash care. So as you heard, there's $5 billion available for this. So there's lots of money in here to make improvements. So just for example, looking at the action plan and where we could focus on going in post-crash care, by controlling the narrative, things like the Traffic Incident Management course, or TIMS, every year we know that there are EMS providers that are struck and killed, firefighters struck and killed on the highway while they're working a crash site. Matter of fact, we just had a female EMS provider killed down in Mississippi or Alabama, where she stopped for a crash and got out and was hit in the roadway. So traffic incident management courses are a great program. I think it's a highly successful, well-established curriculum. There's some other, anything that involves safety with responders, vests, signs, blocking vehicles, all those could be potentials for post-crash care. And then, of course, one of the things that we're after is extrication tools. So our extrication power plants are a little bit old, 20 years plus. Everybody's moving to battery-powered operations with their rams, spreaders, and cutters. And obviously that stuff's pretty expensive, but if it can reduce the scene time by rapidly being able to extricate somebody from a vehicle, those are all things that are fair game in a post-crash care world. And then one of the big things that I think people are looking at is, what scientifically do we know increases the chance of somebody not being a 40%er? And if you've been following the information that's going on lately, certainly whole blood and what's gone on in San Antonio and many other communities, the Dallas Metroplex now with whole blood, these are things that definitely increase the potential for survival of a crash victim. And then other curriculums like PHTLS, pre-hospital trauma life support, where you're trying to focus getting people out quickly and assessing them, and then making notifications to the trauma center. So next slide, please. So this crash here that is the same picture of person on the left here. So this is a person pinned in the vehicle that we were working to extricate out of here. I'm proud to say this guy survived with a tension pneumothorax while he was pinned in the vehicle. He was decompressed in the vehicle. And about 3 years later, he came walking into the fire station to thank us for our activities that essentially saved his life. This is an 11-person MCI on that section of US 160 that I'm talking about. So injury prevention should be part of our repertoire as an EMS fire-based providers. This is something that's kind of glossed over in the curriculums, but it'd be nice not to have to respond to this call at all because somebody was not a drowsy driver, somebody was not an intoxicated driver, or there were a lot of other things that were done to improve the road safety here. So while this is an exciting topic for post-crash care and for EMS people to jump into post-crash care, don't forget about those other things that are in the pillars of SS4. So, for example, what do we got to do to make people safer? Not driving, buzzed or not driving fatigued. Is there some things that we can do to recommend for the road to be safer? And that can be certainly, broached with your local highway, state department, highway division. And, things like, do we need guardrails here? Do we need a barrier between the road? In our SS4 grant, as we're writing the safety plan, we have a section of road where there's been a ton of head-on collisions. And it's a downhill section. It's got 4 lanes, and it does not have a barrier in between the lanes, and there's a turn lane at the very bottom. So sometimes people drift over across the center line into the oncoming traffic as they approach the turn lane. So one of the things we're going to recommend is to improve the safer road there by putting guardrail in between those two, the downhill section, the eastbound and westbound section of that road. And then safer vehicles, I would tell you that I was quite surprised to learn that GM is collecting a lot of data on late model GM vehicles. And not only were we looking at crash data, but we were also looking at near miss data. For example, hard braking, or when people aren't wearing seatbelts, or I think some of you may own vehicles where if you start to drift across the fog line, that white line on the side of the road, or you start to cross over a yellow or a striped yellow, the vehicle will shake the steering wheel or rattle the seat and try to bring you back into the lane. Now that doesn't result in a crash a lot of times, but it may indicate a drowsy driver or an unattentive driver or driver that's texting. So some of this technology where we're starting to grab vehicle data on near misses is probably even more impressive than the crash data. And then, of course, safer speeds. Do we know that there's sections of highway that are blinded? Do we know that there's sections of highway where EMS providers routinely respond to T-bone or other crashes there? And these are situations where maybe a slower speed would give a better braking distance to so there wouldn't be a rear end collision or a T-bone collision with somebody that's pulling out on a highway. And then, of course, much like we've talked about the post-crash care aspect of it, a lot of different opportunities for EMS and fire-based EMS to jump into this. So next slide, please. So just to kind of give you a little bit about what we did with our award, kind of three aspects that we're currently in, into it now. The first thing was writing the grant. Took about 2 full days. A lot of it was research activity that you had to go out and find demographic data. You had to find the underserved populations. You had to find your crash data for the last 5 years, and measuring things like linear roadway feet and those things that are all required to go into the data or into the grant. Now, I would tell you that there are a lot of links on the grant application that you can follow to get this information. It's not hard to find it. I would, on a scale of 1 to 10 with the difficulty of this grant, I would say it's probably a 7 or a 6. But nonetheless, all the hyperlinks are there for you to go find the data. Even census data or, income data when you're looking at underserved populations or disadvantaged populations, there's actually links in the grant program to take you to some of the socio and economic data that you need for the grant. Take some responsibility for something other than post-crash care. This is a comprehensive initiative by the Secretary of Transportation, and there's a lot of folks that are putting a lot of effort into this. So don't be near focused or, don't have nearsightedness on just post-crash care. There are a lot of other things, safer driving, seatbelt usage. Those are all within the wheelhouse of EMS. And, we do that stuff a lot. And lately after, COVID and after 9/11, fire and EMS kind of withdrew into their fire stations or into their EMS quarters and didn't really engage the public as much as we should have. And law enforcement wound up stealing a lot of the thunder of those opportunities to engage the public. Review the pillars. Again, remember that there are a lot of other options that you can get into for the grant writing. So use a little bit of creativity there about what EMS can do to address the other pillars. There's a lot of data out there. The FARS data, many of you may not be familiar with that database, which is the Fatal Accident Reporting System. And then, of course, data from the CUBE or the NEMSIS program. You usually have a state EMS person who's in charge of the data for EMS. Here in Colorado, we have a great team that deals with the data from the CUBE or that's sent up through the NEMSIS database. And you can get an idea about fatal injuries. You can get an idea about those people that you may have transported that had near fatal injuries or that maybe died from something a little bit later, those 40%ers. So talk to your EMS data people and talk to your law enforcement data people. They have a ton of information available for you to put into this grant. And then if there's a way that you can stretch your grant into an underserved area, that's beneficial. I would tell you that we incorporated a section of US 160 from a place called Wolf Creek all the way to the Arizona state line. And the reason we went all the way over to the Arizona state line is we got, that was it, allowed us to incorporate one of the indigenous tribes into our grant writing. And then once you get awarded the grant, you're not done yet with the paperwork because they're going to send you a contract. And one of the things that's important about the contract is to understand that there are some appendixes that the secretary specifically wants filled out. For example, what are you doing to deal with your carbon footprint? And, that's a pretty easy answer for us as we're looking to transition to battery powered extrication equipment, get rid of our fossil fuel power plants that are on our extrication equipment. And while that's not a huge carbon footprint, it does kind of meet the letter of the intention and the leadership vision of the secretary. And then underrepresented and underserved people, again, if we can stretch these grants to get into indigenous peoples or into tribal property or tribal lands, and incorporate them in the feedback. We certainly know that a lot of those places are really, they suffer from a lot of rural trauma, a lot of car crashes on those, desolate roads that are out in the, say, for example, the Navajo Nation, or in our situation, the Ute Mountain Tribe. And then again, what are you doing about diversity? There is an appendix that asks about, are you getting out to everybody? Are you talking to everybody in your region? And not just diversity of, skin color, but diversity of thought. What are those folks thinking along the side of the road while they're waiting for an ambulance? Or, do they know a deadly section of road that they want to give you some feedback on? So again, diversity of thought and diversity of peoples that you want to put in there. And then once we got past the contracting phase, we're now in the work phase. So I would tell you, make sure you parse out that work, get writing right away. As soon as you get your statement of work, get on this and start making some outlines, because there is a fair amount of writing that has to be done with it. Make time, set down, a couple of hours a week to make sure that you're addressing, doing the narratives. And then set up some multimedia streams. This day and age, there's a little bit of it's difficult because there's a lot of people on Twitter, a variety of different mixed media. So collect data from all that. And then lastly, solicit some public opinion, meet with your state reps from the DOT and from Highway Patrol to make sure that you're getting a full picture of what's going on. And talk to your providers. A lot of your EMS providers and fire-based providers and law enforcement know where the dangerous sections of the road are. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of a crash that was a 40%er. We arrived to find this guy trapped in his vehicle. He was still alive, and during the process of extrication, he expired. So again, what we're looking to do is try to prevent this from happening. Like I said, we did incorporate a section of the Ute Mountain Tribe. Our project area goes from Wolf Creek Pass, which is on the Continental Divide, all the way over to the Arizona state border. It encompasses multiple fire departments that we consider our partners with this. US 160, one of the deadliest sections of highway in the state of Colorado. And it was also, we kind of broke this into sectors. So out of this, lengthy section of roadway, we know that each one of them has a unique danger and has different near miss data. So there's a lot of different techniques in the pillars that can be applied to this. Next slide, please. So last slide, I just want to kind of talk about, again, what the benefits are to fire and EMS. One, this is a mentoring opportunity for technical writing. And there's going to be a lot of other opportunities for technical writing and fire and EMS. So this is a good place for somebody to get their feet wet. It may be a break from the street. You put somebody on this, gives them a chance to recharge their batteries. And it's a chance to engage the community. And it's about keeping people safe. It also requires that you're going to have to put somebody on this that has some problem solving thinking and some critical thinking. And then lastly, I would just say that each crash has a story behind it. So the crash up on the upper right corner with the red car, that's actually a car that hit one of our fire trucks on US 160, and it was a fatigued driver. The crash that's down there on the lower left was sent a 12-year-old female to the trauma center and had to be evacuated up to the Front Range with some severe head injury. She was in the passenger seat. That car struck a tow truck that was on the side of the road trying to pick up another disabled vehicle. So back to the traffic incident management piece that is really important there. And again, all these involve somebody's family, and that's really what we're out here to do, is solve some problems and keep people safe, and hopefully everybody goes home to their family on the roadway. So that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much to our panelists. My name is Max Severide. I'm also an EMS specialist working with the NHTSA Office of Emergency Medical Services. And we have been addressing a number of questions posted throughout the course of the seminar. Wanted to answer a few of those questions additionally for all recipients. One question has to do with the timing of the notice of funding opportunity. And if Paul, would you be able to comment about when you expect and where you expect it to be posted?
Sure, happy to do so. We're expecting February. I don't have a given week, probably in the mid-February is when I'm guessing at the moment. And there's a few different places. It's up posted on grants.gov as an opportunity. It'll be posted on USDOT's website. We've normally done a press release. We have a listserv as well, and we can work with our folks at the NHTSA EMS office so that when the notice of funding is up, you all are able to distribute it to your community as well. So there's a few different places.
Great, thank you. Some additional questions came in about the types of organizations to apply. For example, individual EMS agencies as opposed to what may be listed as eligible applicants. So for example, private or nonprofit ambulance agencies, government or tribal EMS agencies. And maybe Paul, you could first answer that question about how EMS and 911 might work with eligible partners to put applications together, like Bruce, for example.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And but one of the eligibility pieces, so we had some sneaky cities who were like, well, my Department of Public Works and my Department of Law Enforcement both want to apply. Can we both apply? And I was like, no, the entity is the city. So maybe you're the office, you're the EMS group, you'd be working with your, whatever group that is, the mayor or the county executive, the whatever ends up being. If you're in a nonprofit situation, we actually have folks who have worked together to find someone who is kind of like the lead applicant, and then they can support. So in Alaska, a number of municipalities got together. Only one applied, but they're working with the Alaska Municipal League, and they're going to be doing a lot of the planning. So there's ways to be creative about it. You just need to make sure you have an eligible applicant for the folks who are applying.
Great, thank you. I know we've gone over time, but we decided we might go a little bit time over because we do have some good questions and questions from folks in the audience. Additional questions that we've received, and just as a reminder, we will be posting this information as well as slides on our ems.gov website. You'll see links to those locations in the Q&A posted currently. Additional questions that we've received are specific to types of different eligible expenditures under the course of the program. For example, personal protective equipment or exercises or different types of activities. And I, as a person who's watched the SS4A program from the outside a little bit, I'm not familiar with exclusions about types of activities, but maybe Paul, you could talk a little bit about the generalities of what may or may not be included in specific applications.
Yeah, and it all goes back to, well, particularly the implementation of their projects and strategies. What is your project that you're trying to address? What is the safety problem you're trying to address? And how would that, what you're looking for, be part of that project? So we don't necessarily just fund a grant to give like PPE per se. However, if there is a post-crash care piece in order to knowing that there is a lot of secondary incidents and traffic incident management issues, in order to make people safe, both that you're going to be doing a series of activities, which includes retro-reflective gear, other equipment that will help, that could be potentially eligible. So it's contextual, really, of like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the project associated with it? And it has to fit within that project, not I want some equipment. Can you give me some equipment? And that you kind of have to think about it a little bit. And that's where the planning process that Bruce mentioned and the importance of getting in that ground floor is really important.
Great. One very specific question about implementation grants. One, if there's a grant for demonstration activities to fund a pilot, the pilot works and you want to continue, can you apply for implementation to fully implement the pilot? Maybe Paul, you could take a stab at that one.
Yes. I mean, assuming that the demonstration activity is found to be beneficial, you include it in your action plan, then you apply through an implementation grant to roll it out system-wide, more permanent, and that's fair game.
Got it. Another question came in about previous grant proposals and whether folks can look at those grant proposals online. I don't know if there are proposals that are posted, but definitely listings of the applicants who have received grant application awards in both FY22 and 23. Those are posted under Buchanan's questions with a list of the 2023 awards or 2022 awards. Any ideas, Paul or Bruce, about maybe contacting organizations to get some more details? Certainly nothing would prevent a person from identifying a grant application that sounds interesting and contacting them directly in that municipality. But Paul, any suggestions?
Maybe I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Bruce in case there's anything else to add. We don't post example applications. Ask a friend. Usually they share, particularly for those plan and demonstration grants. Those I think are pretty straightforward. One thing I would note is that the program does evolve a little bit, and so what was great last time around might just be good this time around. And some of our criteria we changed a little bit. For most of it's not going to matter, but 2 years ago, awardee might have an application that is not quite as perfect as it was the first year. So just be cognizant of what we're seeing in the webinars and other resources, and you can use your counterpart's application as a good starting place.
Great.
Anything
Bruce,
else,
any suggestions, Bruce, on that in regards to figuring out information about other applicants' proposals or your proposal, for example?
Yeah, I'm happy if people want to email me, and I'm at I don't know if we put our email addresses on this presentation, but if people want to email me, I'll be happy to drop our application in, and then also our contract with DOT. And I think it's really kind of 2 documents: grant application and then the contract piece, and you get a chance to look at what some other people use. And I try to tell people that grant writing is kind of an intersection of, one, following what the deliverables are and what the rules are in the grant, and number 2, having some creativity. And I think that this grant does afford you a lot of opportunity for justifying some creative ideas to improve traffic safety.
Great. Maybe I'll turn it to Gam Wijetunge. Gam, do you have any other comments or questions that you'd like to also have us address before we get close to the end of this webinar, now that we've gone over a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Max. And appreciate everyone tuning in and staying a little bit late. We're going to be following up with answers to questions that we didn't get to, and of course, the recording of this webinar will be made available. Do want to touch on one. We got a question in the chat about the vehicles, and this is probably a question for Paul. Can ambulances be used in this grant if you do not have any and cover, looks like a 1,600 square mile response area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes back to the equipment, and this is a great so you're developing an action plan, or there's one that's that identifies the lack of timely emergency response as a major reason why people have lost their lives. And the solution that you described as a project is purchasing ambulances. That could work, but it has to have that cascade. You have a plan that describes the issue, and the project correlates back to that issue. So it's a little contextual, but the answer is potentially yes. If there are significant benefits and effective actions that can be had that are identified in an action plan, that includes purchasing of an ambulance, it's potentially eligible.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I think it goes back to that creative approach that Chief Evans was talking about, and that's great. And just another reminder to folks, one of the questions was asked is how to get involved in the planning process. Paul mentioned that many planning and demonstration grants have already been awarded, and you can see who those awardees are online at the SS4A website. So again, encourage folks to reach out to your localities that might have already got awards and get involved in the planning process now. It's a great opportunity. We are at time. Want to thank everyone again for tuning in today. we, as we mentioned, when the next NOFO for SS4A comes out, we'll be forwarding that through our EMS update listserv. So please sign up for EMS updates on ems.gov, and we'll be sure to forward that as it comes through. And want to thank our panelists, Paul and Bruce, for participating today. I think this has been a really enlightening webinar, and we appreciate you putting time aside in your days. And thanks to all our attendees as well. Thank you all.